G'day folks, welcome back to the Coffin Nail. My name is Lightbreaker, and today I am chatting with Ash from Venom Prison. G'day mate, welcome to the Coffin Nail.
How are you doing? Thanks for
Good,
having me
man.
as well. Thank you.
No, it's a pleasure. Very excited to hear on February 4th your new album Erebus coming out on Century Media, and I've got a lot of questions about this album. I'm very excited for it, as I'm sure everyone else is as well. Let's start with the title. You've always had these very poignant one-word titles for the albums. What does Erebus mean in context of this album?
So we've always gone for the one name titles and stuff, and we've always gone for the mythology theme to a lot of it. And Erebus was, born from chaos. And like every time we do a record, whether it was Samsara, the rebirth cycle, or Animus, which was the hatred, we just always followed that. Found it built like a lot of characteristics to us. It gave an aesthetic. So we're looking at the album, it was almost like you could hear it as well at the same time. And I always kind of thought visually, even from the lyrics, titles, artwork, it is one package. And I feel like doing Erebus made a lot of sense. Like it was a no-brainer. It was just like, right, let's go for the next, bit of research and theme we can go with. So this one was born from chaos.
And do you come up with that title before writing the songs, or is that something that just makes sense once the songs are finished?
It's kind of a constant floating back and forth, if I'm honest. Like, because the writing process is always so long, and we'll do a lot of pre-production. So, I'll do a lot of demos at home, and then I'll send them to Larissa, and she'll add the vocals on top. So I'm kind of getting lyrics, as I'm going along writing the songs myself anyway. So the discussion is always there from the start. So it doesn't really get, confirmed until we get like right to the end of like the studio session where we're still sold on it. So that's what's going to go type thing. So it is one of those things where we get the idea and we run with it until the very last minute and go,
right,
we're still into it now. And that's kind of how it works.
Awesome. Well, with everything going on the last year or two, how do you get through the writing process and the recording process while you're in and out of lockdowns?
It's funny. It was easy for us really because we just did what we always did anyway. Myself, Ben, our guitarist, we both have our own like home studio setups, and it's perfect for just demoing and just like smash out a bunch of ideas, and then I'll send in, the stems or like a built song and be like, what do you think? And then you'll go, hey, chuck me that bit of the song. I've got an idea I want to add. So I send stems to it and then he adds. And it's always been like that. Like we've never been able to write in a practice room. I find that we're all so frantic. It's like someone will be trying to teach someone a riff, and before you know it, like our drummer wants to, go for a drum solo all of a sudden, and I'm like, you've never done one of them, mate. Why are you doing them now when I'm trying to teach someone? From a very early stage of this band, I think we all just come to like this conclusion: we weren't going to do it in a practice room. Obviously, when the songs are formed, we'll get as a band, and we'll play them out and stuff, and see how it works out before stepping into the studio. But no, we won't write in practice rooms.
Right.
Just because we're so ridiculous. Like that is the reason. We're just so ridiculous we can't. But no, that is the process. And that's how we dealt with it through lockdown as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, everyone who's ever been in a band knows the difficulty of trying to tune while the drummer then just starts doing fills and vice versa. And
it's a nightmare. Like everyone always says, oh, being in a band must be awesome. No, it's not. Have you been in a practice room when you're trying to write a song? But no, we only kind of do that before going into the studio when songs are already formed. And we just did the same through lockdown. We were kind of lucky because I think the restrictions were easing just as we were about to kind of like get into the practice rooms again. So we were like super lucky with timing as well. Recording was a bit different though. We were going up in small groups. So from December 2020 till July 2021, I believe, we were going back and forth. Yeah, it was really long. We were going 2 weeks studio, 2 weeks home, 2 weeks back in the studio, 2 weeks home. And we did that till July. We were going in little groups. So to start with, it was, drummer, myself and Ben. Then it was myself, Ben, Larissa, then myself, Ben, Mike. And it was kind of very different not to have everyone there all at once. But it was still completely doable. It wasn't like it was an issue or anything, but it certainly felt different.
No, I bet. But it sounds like you and Ben are the overseers.
Yeah, you could say that. In terms of in writing, when it comes to writing, me and Ben really get stuck in on everything, just because we know everything like inside and out. We know how the songs were intended. We know where, a dynamic was, building or where it was supposed to be. And I think one slight, not change, but like one thing that could kind of not be in the context of it, and it's like you've just lost the whole moment that you've imagined in your head for so long. So it's kind of like you've been writing for like, a year and a half, maybe 2 years. And then you think to yourself, well, if I just go to the studio every day, like it's nothing compared to what it's taken to write it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you mean. All right. And you're saying with the title being something that makes sense with the songs for you, for the engineer and the producer, do you have reference albums for vibe or specific sounds that you give them when you're going in, want certain things to sound like this or anything like that?
No, we've never used a reference for Venom Prison. We've always kind of said, if this is how the song feels like it sounds, then that's Venom Prison sound. I've never kind of referenced any albums or artists or tones or anything. It's more once everything, like it's like the way I play and my sound is so different to Ben's. But when we play together, it's like it complements each other, and it's kind of like that's not something we can reference. It's just something we've got to hash out until it works. And it was the same with Erebus going into the studio. It was kind of Scott kind of already had a real good idea of our bands, because I think with him coming from the same background as us when he was playing in his band Stamping Ground years ago, I think he understood.
Stamping Ground.
Yeah. So Scott Atkins is basically, he did our record and he was in Stamping Ground, and he already kind of understood the band quite well in terms of like what we were like as people and how we would write, and kind of understood Venom Prison quite well. But he knew what we needed to kind of iron out, and just taking out some of these flaws that we may have picked up, and just trying to like not rework us, but just kind of get that evolution to keep going from record to record. And I think he kind of was fully on board with most of the things we were doing. And even if there was stuff that wasn't working out, he was completely transparent with us. And it was never, this is bad. It was, what is this doing? And every time he used to say that, it would send my brain into like a complete overload, because I'm so used to this demo of a song.
Yeah.
And he always used to say like, oh, you've got demo-itis. And I would just be like, when he would say it, it would be so, I would almost get angry at the fact that it was so true. And it would kind of get to the point where he'd say, hey, what's this bit for the song? And if I got to the point where I was completely stumped and I couldn't answer it, I would just be like, you're right. That, you get it. You're an outside perspective as well as, someone creative building it with us as well. So it was nice to have a lot of his input and opinions on things. So I think it was good for us to kind of start figuring out where the sound of Venom Prison would evolve to.
Yeah, I get you. Well, I mean, like, it's a very sort of story writing kind of perspective. Like, you could have this cool scene, but how does it serve the plot? Or it's nice to adapt that, especially to death metal.
And I think I've always been, especially when I write, I've always been so aggressive and energetic. And there's been moments where I kind of, and I'm not discrediting anything we've ever done before. Like, I still think it really did what it did, and I still am very proud of them. But I have to be honest with my flaws to improve again and again and again.
Yeah.
So coming to the realization of like some of my favorite riffs on previous records, I'd be like, why doesn't it come back? Or why isn't it longer? Or why?
Yeah.
And it was all those moments that all started falling into place. And I was like, this is a flaw that's now becoming obvious to myself. And it was quite a good feeling, if I'm honest, because it was like a moment where you had clarity and you were just like, yeah, no, this is right. Like, what am I doing? Like, this makes sense. And just little things like the way he got everyone to perform as well. Like really, really organic. It was like we weren't allowed any like, editing. We weren't dropping in on parts. He would just be like, no, you get that part right.
I like that.
It didn't matter if we sat there for like, it wouldn't matter if we sat there for like 7 hours on a section. He'd be like, you get that section right. And when I listen to the record though, I kind of, and even if, the singles, like you can hear that, like you can hear there's almost something really organic, and everyone would say, yes, the production's got cleaner, but realistically it's the playing that's got cleaner. It's that's kind of a lot of the time where I think people always go, oh yeah, the production's got so much better and cleaner. And it's like, actually, no, the musicians have also been whipped into shape to play properly.
Yeah. I mean, I love Samsara, but you're playing on the few songs I've heard so far of Erebus. It's another level above that.
Exactly. And like, I don't think you can do that on your own without having someone like highlight all of those flaws for you. And I think that was a really like important moment for me. It was when I kind of started to understand a lot of these things where it was like, oh, the production's actually us. It's what we're performing. And it was same with the vocals. Like, we would be so used to like the way we'd layer vocals and stuff. And Scott would be like, Larissa, why are you doing that? Your voice is strong without, why don't why don't you just go for clarity and use, that power you've got instead of kind of, using layer and layer and layers and stuff. And it kind of shows. And I think like each member just like has moments where you just kind of like just start to hear them, for those moments, like especially a lot with the bass, a lot. Like I'm a big fan of bass, and the bass sections on some of the songs are like so cool, and it's just nice to see it highlighted for once.
Oh, that's awesome.
I'm super excited for everyone to get it, because I think it's going to be it'll be very different, but also that natural evolution that you kind of see what happens when, we get whipped into shape.
Yeah, for sure. But at the same time, one of the things that has always been to me like, okay, that's a Venom Prison thing, is doing like a big sweep guitar solo, but still having the vocals going over it as if it's not there. And I'm glad that there's still a bit of that in Judges, because that to me is very much your thing.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean there. And Judges was the perfect reference as well, because like we were just like, how do we do what we do but not do the same thing? So we were just like, hold a vocal harmony over it.
Yeah. Well, speaking of doing something different though, I mean, The Pain of Voices, I think Oh, sorry, you got me there now?
Yeah, go on. Sorry,
yeah.
I missed that.
That's all right. The Pain of Voices, I think it might be my favorite Venom Prison song yet. And it's so different to what I've heard before. How did you get to that? Because it seems like such a huge jump from not everything, but the majority of your back catalog.
I think it's something that we could always do. I think it's just something that we were always worried to do at a time. And when we finally, were like laying out the record in our heads and just kind of planning it out to how we wanted it to, play through and what dynamics we were going to try and visit. because we kind of try and picture what we want it to sound like as a long play. So
That's
like
cool.
it was, you know, it has a lot more breathing space in Erebus, I think.
Yeah.
And I just think, yeah, when we kind of got to some of these things, like I think we just didn't, when I say we didn't care, like in terms of we just really liked it, that it never really occurred to us. And then I remember like we stayed at some accommodation when we were at the studio, and we had quite a late night. And I was speaking to our bassist, and funny enough, we just finished tracking that song.
Huh.
And I was like saying to him that there's just not a single part of me that just feels afraid of that song. Like I felt it was a good song, and everyone else felt it was a good song. And then our bassist got onto a really interesting, you know, conversation that I never thought of before. But he was like, "When did metal bands stop doing this?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, Metallica won, Nothing Else Matters. You know, Ozzy Osbourne, Killer of Giants, like
Yeah.
all these." And he was like, on that Metallica record, he was like, "I think it's one or Nothing Else Matters. I'm not sure, but it's track 5." And then as soon as he said that, I was like, "Pain of Oasis, track 5." And
Yeah.
it was just like the way that I kind of just, I could only agree with it. Like I could only agree. Like there was nothing about that statement that I was like,
No, 100%.
that is like, when did we forget about this?
Yeah, that was always like middle of a Metallica album, like Fade to Black. Even Sanitarium has a lot of it clean. Yeah.
It just made me think, like, and it was so true. It was so true. It was just like, why did we stop doing it, or why didn't we do it? Because all these records that I'm listening to, probably more than anything, like Ozzy, Sabbath, like Metallica, all that, I never thought of it like that ever. And I was like,
Yeah.
no, I always loved those songs. And I was like, well, we're a metal band. Why can't we do this? And then
Absolutely.
the moment that, you know, we had that song mastered and finished, and I was like, that is exactly, you know, what we want.
Oh, that's great,
And
man.
I think the response was really cool to it as well. I think people were a lot more open to it than, you know, sometimes you kind of think a bit negatively, because it's like tween vocals, and you know what people are like. Sometimes they're just like, oh my god, they're selling out. But it's like, it's the least sellout song we've ever done. Do you know what I mean? It's there's nothing about it that isn't how it should be. It felt moody. It felt miserable. It felt how it was meant to feel. And there was just nothing about it that I was like, how isn't this a Venom Prison song? It has all the ticks of what a Venom Prison song would contain. So I think moving forward in the future, there could possibly be more of this coming.
I'm glad to hear it. Like it's paid off a lot for a couple of bands recently. Like I'm thinking of particularly heavy bands like Ingested and Mental Cruelty. Their latest 2 albums are like, well, what if we do slam, but in a like sort of expansive, more sort of progressive death metal-y sort of a way. And it's still clearly them, but it's something that they wouldn't have tried doing 5 or 6 years ago. And it's some of their best work in both cases.
Yeah. I think a lot more people are starting to kind of realize that more and more over the last couple of years, I'd say. I think it's just becoming, I always kind of said to the guys in Venom Prison that we would never do the same record twice. Like, I don't think Animus sounds like Samsara, and I don't think Samsara sounds like Erebus, and I don't see any. I hear the Venom Prison sound, but I wouldn't say they're the same records. And I think that's kind of why I feel that we needed to start adding these things into, you know, our sound, so we could kind of just expand it and not burn out the bands doing the same thing over and over again. Because it's the right time to do it. We're not that old as a band. We haven't done that many records. People find us a bit unpredictable record to record. Right. So it all made perfect sense. And I think that's kind of the formula we kind of want to always follow, to be honest.
Yeah. I think it's funny with people are already labeling you unpredictable 2 or 3 now a third studio album in, like Compared to what, you know?
That's what confuses me. It's kind of always the thing of like, oh, how's this record going to sound? And like people have even messaged me about Erebus and been like, oh, give us an idea of what it sounds like. And I'm like, it doesn't sound like anything you would have heard from us before,
Yeah.
but you'll know it's us when you hear it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the way I like records to be anyway, because, you know, there's a lot of bands that have been going for a long time and have done a lot of records. And I think they're in that position now where if they do try and take any, you know, musical changes, it is deemed super, super risky when you're like, you know, you're 15 albums in and your fan base is huge and they love this sound you've created. You don't have that opportunity then to take that turn because you've built that sound and that identity to your band that a lot of, you know, fans that had probably followed them for like 15, 20 years won't be able to adjust to that change. It won't make sense.
Yeah, I know what you mean. But hey, with that in mind, actually, I was going to ask you about this later, but this is the right time. Like, my jumping on point for Venom Prison was Primeval.
Okay,
And
cool.
so I didn't know at the time it was re-recordings of old songs. And for you, as someone in the band, when you think about the vibe of Animus, the vibe of Samsara and now Erebus, where does Primeval fit in there? Does it feel like another studio album, or does it have a completely different connection to you?
Yeah, it has a completely different connection. I always wanted to do when we started the band, it was just myself and Larissa, and that Defied Tyrant demo was just done by us. We kind of recorded it in an apartment and just mic'd all the guitars up and bass. Nice. And then we just got like 50 euros together to like, you know, get some tapes. And that's kind of how it all started. But Ben shortly joined after it. And Ben's become like Ben became such a big part of Venom Prison, but he wasn't on those he wasn't on that. And then you have, you know, our bassist Mike, who then joined just after me, and then Larissa did Primal Chaos, and then Mike, our bassist, becomes such a big sound. And I always sat there thinking, what would we sound like if we re-recorded those songs with everyone playing these parts?
Yeah.
And I wanted to do it after Animus, but the timing wasn't right. And then I wanted to do it after Samsara, and same again, timing wasn't right just at that moment. And then I think it got to December, I guess 2019, I believe. And we just kind of were like, right, we've got a bit of spare time. We're writing a new album as we're recording that record as well. Yeah. So I was like, let's redo these old songs for, you know, old time's sake and just kind of get it done and see how it all pans out. But whilst we're at it, why don't we put 2 new songs on the end of this record that could have been on Erebus,
right?
To kind of break that, you know, idea in, you know, slowly but surely. And I think that's when we did Slayer of Holofernes, and it had the singing chorus. It was kind of just a way of seeing like how we could write a song like that and how people would react to a song like that. So it was kind of like a, you know, double-edged sword, really. It was more to see, can we pull this off? Will people like it? Yeah. And then I think once we kind of finally finished doing Slayer of Holofernes in the studio and we listened back, I think it just made us a bit more ambitious to know that, like, oh, we can try this. It does work with our sound. The Primeval was also a very big helping hand, really, to like get to Erebus, because I think it made us revisit a lot of the earlier stuff that we may have skipped over on Animus, and kind of started to figure out what Venom Prison whole, you know, with every release taken into consideration, what it would sound like evolved. And it was a really cool process. It was really cool because it was nice to go back to like songs that I hadn't even thought of playing in, you know, how many years it was. And no,
well, you can hear that in it. Like when I heard it the first time, my first time listening to the band, cool, I love it. And it did stand out at the end, having the clean vocals, because it's different to everything else. But now even more so after listening to the other records. And I put it on again today for the first time in a while. And I'm like, this is so stylistically different. It's it's a lot more direct death metal than the sort of genre fluidity that you've kind of become synonymous with. I mean, we were talking about it earlier. You don't try to have one sound, and I guess that's how you've had people arguing online for 5 years about what genre you are.
Oh God!
But listening to Primeval again now, when I'm a bit more familiar with the band, I'm like, okay, yeah, obviously it's re-recordings.
Yeah, like the genre thing always makes me laugh. Like the genre, I love it. Like I just.
You're not tired of that conversation?
I love it. I think it's so funny. I sat on my phone the other day watching people argue on a Facebook thread about if we were deathcore or if we were death metal, and ultimately, I don't think we're either. That's what makes me laugh. I just think that we're a metal band. Like that when I didn't come from like when we started this band, we were all in hardcore bands before this band. I'd never played in a metal band before. Like I'd only ever played in hardcore bands and punk bands, and they all kind of came to an end, and all of us did somehow, all at the same time, weirdly. And it was, do you want to try a metal band? That was the conversation. Like there was never any references, there was never any genres thrown in there. It was, hey, do you want to try and do a metal band? Yeah, sure. And that's how Venom Prism started.
That's awesome, man.
Like that's why it makes me laugh when people care so much about like the genre side of it. Like I understand we need a way of categorizing it. I understand that, but ultimately it is just metal.
Yeah.
Like whether you go down all these subgenres, deathcore still roots back to metal. So
it's a fine line, really, deathcore, and there's a handful of bands I could say, yeah, that's deathcore. And for me it'd be what's the name of it? Through the Eyes of the Dead.
Yes.
Like for me, that's deathcore because it's exact little traits that are very easy to identify. But if you complicate it, muddy the waters in any way, what is it? Deathcore? Is it technical death metal? Is it progressive death metal? No, it's not progressive. It's technical. And fuck's sake,
it doesn't end.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't end. And like, I just won't. I won't bring myself to it where I'm just kind of like, it's metal, guys. Like it's metal. Like you spent so much time talking about this genre and less time listening to music. Like what's going on here? Like this is ridiculous. But no, I always see people say like, no, they're definitely deathcore because they're death metal and they're hardcore. And I'm like, it's like, I get it. I get your theory. I get your theory.
But mate, nobody hates extreme metal more than extreme metal fans.
Oh God, yeah, you're telling me. Like, they love it, but at the same time, there's many, many funny moments where I'm like, what on earth is going on?
Well, listen, you guys, this is a very forced segue, but you guys have put your own voices out there to discuss the band and other things with your podcast. There's 5 episodes in the past year. Mm-hmm. And I was listening to the latest one today with Eliran Kantor. Is that his name?
Yeah.
Yeah, who did the artwork for the new album, which is beautiful, by the way. I loved it. He really charmed me. I didn't know that he's worked on the Obscura and Cryptosis albums, which I loved as well. But he lives here in Friedrichshain in Berlin. Like, we're in the same district right now. That dude is great. That podcast is awesome. How'd you get to doing podcast?
We've got a lot. We've got a lot more podcasts. I've just finished editing another one the other day. Funny enough.
Choice.
So we're going to keep that going. It was originally a lockdown idea,
right?
And it was a way for us to just communicate with people and each other and stuff. And then not long ago, I was having a conversation with Larissa, and I was like, "Do you think people, dig this? Do you think people like it?" And it was like, "Oh, is it just a lockdown thing? Maybe we should just not do anymore." And I was like, "No, do you know what? We should keep it going because regardless, it's fun for us to do. It's cool just to kind of connect with people, we either work with or toured with or even want to get to know." And I think people are interested in stuff like that. I think it's kind of cool to, rip down all, this illusion stuff, band stuff that's always around people of like the idea of how everyone's meant to be and all this. And then it's kind of the podcast just completely exposes that. It just completely gets rid of any of that where it's like, nope, it's like the first episode, I think Joe's telling us about how he's had like a bad chest for about 30 minutes. And somehow we're all just talking to him and being like, did you go to the hospital? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, did you have a heart attack? He was like, no. I was like, did you smoke too much weed? And he was like, no. And I was like, oh, I don't know what's wrong with you then. And like, we just left it filming.
Yep, that's definitely a podcast, all right.
And I was just like, do you know what? Like, I think it just brings a new light to the band.
Yeah, for sure.
To let people have like, just have more of an insight on that, there are real people behind it.
Yeah, I think deification of people in bands it's a slippery slope. It doesn't end anywhere good,
Yeah.
But no, that's awesome. I see behind you there, this will be lost in the radio listeners, but you have a Venom Prison skate deck. Can you tell us a bit more about that, please?
Yeah, so this skate deck is cool. It's real cool. Like, it's a local skate shop, not far from me in Newport in South Wales, called Freestyle. And I've been friends with the owner of the shop since I was a kid. Is where I bought my first skateboard from as a kid.
Nice.
And he's always been involved in like the music scene and stuff. Even when I was playing in hardcore bands, he would kind of jump in the van with us, and we would, go and play shows, and he'd always hang out with us. And
that's cool.
I think it was last year that I kind of just said to him, I was like, I've always wanted Venom Prison to have a skate deck, because I was in the shop. I was like, oh, how cool would it be just to have a Venom Prison board? And he was like, why don't we do a collaboration? And like that moment, I was like, right, sold, done. Like, we're doing it. Like, I've always wanted this band to have a skateboard. So he went ahead with it, and like the band's done now, really. We've got the skateboard.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, mission accomplished. It's all
We've got the skateboard now.
But can other people get it? Is it still available?
Yeah, it is. It's on www.venomprison.com. I believe there's we did a lot of cool sizes as well. We didn't just do like one size fits all, because if a lot of bands or brands that have done skateboards before have kind of just done this, one size for all. And it's like, hang on a minute. If you've ever skated,
then.
Like if you've ever skated in your life, it's like the most offensive thing. It's like telling someone what size to wear. But we got a lot of cool sizes, like 8s. I know we still got 8s in. We got a bit bigger than 8s. We didn't go I don't think we went lower than 7.5 possibly, but I don't think Venom Prison stocked them. I think we just stocked 8 as our smallest, just because people just seem to skate bigger boards now, apparently.
Yeah, I've only ever been a longboard guy.
Yeah, like it seems to be like really common at the moment in the shop, like a lot of turtle shell, a lot of longboards, and even the skate decks, they all seem to be 8 and higher, which when I started skating, 8 was like huge. It would just be like seeing someone with 8 in the bowl, and you'd be like, where'd you get that surfboard from?
Yeah.
But
well,
no.
like where I grew up with cobblestones, no, you're fine, but cobblestones and no skate parks, you'd be off any skateboard in seconds, no matter how good you were. You need something that can roll over dodgy roads, Yeah,
I was kind of lucky. Around here, there was one massive indoor skate park, but that burnt down a while back. And then the council just put loads of skate parks around the area. I think we've got like 4 or 5, and one of the skate parks, the council got Grim, the freestyle guy, the skate guy, to contribute to the design and the idea, because there were a few that they built that we call them skin shredders, because like all the lips and everything were just, it looked like such a rushed job. Like, it was so bad. So like they got skaters from the community involved to kind of make sure that the designs and everything were cool. But honestly, there's never not anybody at those parks. They're always so full.
That's really good.
But that's one good thing around here, is that they do definitely, take a lot of that stuff into consideration. We've got a lot of venues and, a lot of places to go, really.
It's really good to hear. You don't often hear that, especially outside of capital cities.
Yeah,
I wasn't expecting to say this in this interview, but hats off to Newport City Council.
Big up the Newport County. Yeah, here we
Yeah,
go.
Cymru and Biff, lads. Fair play.
Oh, I love it. I love it. But no, we're very lucky. Like around here, I think we've got a lot of good spots. Yeah, it's
Awesome.
good. It's good.
So you not had any stalker fans hanging around the skate park?
Nah, nah, no. I've never really had that, to be honest. Like, I don't know whether it's just because I'm like, especially like around if you go to a skate park, everyone just talks to everyone, you know.
Yeah,
Like everyone's just like saying hello, walking past. Even if they did or didn't know, you wouldn't know anyway
yeah,
because everyone's saying hello, every 2 seconds.
yeah. I know the
But
way.
it's cool. It's a good place. It is a good place.
That's awesome. Great places that music takes you, huh?
The
Well,
dreams.
you guys only had a couple of shows last year, which is more than a lot of bands can say. You headlined, or you're on the main stage at Bloodstock. And you had a couple of shows in October, right?
Those ones didn't go ahead in the
Oh, they
end.
didn't go ahead.
They didn't go ahead. We were
Shit.
still in the midst of COVIDy stuff.
Oh yeah,
Which,
that thing. Yeah, heard
yeah,
about
that
it.
that that thing that it just hasn't gone yet.
God.
But no, Bloodstock main stage was awesome, very very good, and it was cool to kind of have that as the first show back.
Yeah. And so,
And we are like practicing for it. Sorry,
no, it's grand. Just dodgy connection. Go ahead.
you broke up. Yeah, we had it as our first show back, which was really cool. And when we were at the practice rooms, I was just kind of sat there just thinking, how do you make it more special? How do you know that this isn't the last show again for ages? Like, how
Mm.
do you know? So I just said to the guys, I was like, guys, can I use some of the money to just go and buy fire? And
That's
they
what
were
you
like,
want to
yeah.
hear.
Like nobody like even batted an eyelid. Like it was the smoothest conversation I've ever had in my life. It was just like everyone's there either having a cup of coffee or a cigarette or like whatever, like a daytime beer. And I just kind of went, guys, and they were like, yeah. I was like, can I purchase some fire? And they were like, yeah, sure. I was like, oh, all right, great. And I just sent the email. And, no, it literally like
well,
people were like, oh, how did you get?
well, I was going to say your evolution into Welsh Metallica is almost complete. You've got your slow jam. Now you've got your pyro. Now you just need Bob Rock. And there you go.
Well, imagine that now, like next record, Bob Rock. Imagine that. But no, it was more to do with that. I kind of, I was like thinking about it at the practice room, and I was like, I want a million caps on stage. I want
Mm.
fire everywhere, and I was just I thought in my honestly, like my honest thought in my head was, who knows if this is the last one for another 2 years.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I treated it. I was just like, guys, I want all the guitar cabinets. I want all the fire. I got like
Yeah.
2 photographers and stuff. I was like, guys, just take photos. I got it. If this is the last one for ages, I just got to see it. I got to remember and, got a good one type thing. And that's kind of how we treated it. And I think treating it like that kind of made us start thinking a bit more then for like future live stuff. Because I
Mm.
didn't realize it was just an email and you get fire. Like I didn't.
Is it actually that simple, huh?
Yeah, literally, it is that simple. Like if you want fire, you just send an email, and then it just ends up there. And I was just like, wow, like wicked. Like I'll
Fucking
be doing
awesome.
that more in the future.
For sure. Well, with that in mind, do we have any gigs coming up? I haven't seen anything announced. You've
uh, so we've got Outbreak Fest, which is like more of a hardcore lineup festival. We've got Download Fest,
oh nice.
um, but I think I'm not sure what we're doing other than that. I know we've got a few of festivals. I know we've got like festivals in the pipeline and stuff, but I
Mm.
think we're just kind of playing it by ear with the record at the moment and
Yeah.
just kind of seeing how it's going to go. Because I was saying to the guys, like a lot of the time, people are like, drop your record, go on tour. But I just don't think it really works like that sometimes. I feel like people, me personally, and if I go from my perspective of it, I really need to sit down with the record. Like,
Yeah, same.
like if the record is dropped and the show is that day, I can't do both. Like,
Yeah, yeah, of course.
like because otherwise I'm just watching something that I don't fully understand.
Yeah.
like not as if I don't understand when I watch a brand new band I've never heard of.
No,
In
but
like
that's
I've got the record and I want to listen to it.
yeah, and like a band you've never heard of is not the same thing at all. I mean, both as a fan and as a performer, you want that feeling of people singing back to you a song that was released like 2 months ago, as if it came out 2 years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It just in my head it just makes perfect sense that rushing to go on a tour just isn't really the answer
yeah,
to like to the bigger picture. And I feel like, you kind of drop your album and you go on tour straight away, and then people see you perform those songs when they haven't really sat with the album much.
yeah,
And then a couple months later, you're like, oh, we'll come back and play those songs again. And it's like, oh, well, I kind of seen you a couple months ago.
yeah,
Like, and I think sometimes patience with a lot of these things kind of like that's definitely the one thing lockdown has taught me a lot is, patience and reflect on what you're going to do before you act on it, like
yeah,
especially, and I don't mean that in like, like a militant way,
mm,
but more as in when we started the band, we would write, we'd go on tour, we'd get back, we'd write, we'd go on tour, then we'd go and record, then we'd go back on tour. And there was never any time to reflect on what we were actually doing. And there was never, time to figure out, where we go from there and what is going to grow it and what's going to really work for us as a band in
yeah,
the long run. Because I think the way I see it now more than ever is that I would rather Venom Prison have longevity and not burn out and keep doing stuff that people like record after
yeah,
record,
100%.
but just not burning the band out. And I
Mm,
feel that's what's happening to a lot of young bands where, they kind of start their band, and we've always had like this way drilled into us that you need to get in a band straight away and you've got to play every town and you've got to play every city.
yeah,
Maybe you did years ago, but we have the
yeah,
internet now, and it's like let people brew and kind of
yeah,
get to know your band and become like familiar with the sound of your band and like what your band's about and stuff. And then when you do see that flyer pop up, you're like, oh, I'm actually really into that band, like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
rather
Uh,
than just this new band showing up everywhere all the time.
Absolutely. And there's some smaller bands that maybe have a following that wouldn't make them in any way noteworthy in their own area, city, whatever, back in the day, but they've got tens of thousands of fans around the world from just random places because they find them online. Like, say what you will about Spotify, there's loads of small bands that I have found on playlists there that I would never have found. It would have taken me days of digging through crates and record stores back in the day to find some of these little gems. And yeah,
100%.
it's not, it doesn't amount to a world tour, but you do have pockets of very loyal fans all over the place.
Yeah, 100%. I think same with what you're saying about Spotify. I've discovered so many things I would never have found, and like I kind I know a lot of people always say stuff about Spotify. I know there's a lot of negativity about
Yeah,
Spotify, and I kind of understand where that negativity comes from, but it is undeniable that I've discovered so much through
yeah,
it. Like I have found so many bands, and I think that's kind of where my realization over time has kind of started to set in place with you have these new bands and they're young people and they're very ambitious and they want to go out and do this and do that, and they're spending every penny they can to get where they are. They're playing shows and they're coming home 200 quid short, and
yeah,
then they go and they break up in a year, and then you wonder
mm,
why. And it's not because they're lazy, it's not because they don't want to do it, it's because they're completely defeated
yeah,
of the fact that they banned for a year, they played a show, lost 200 quid there, played another show there, lost 400 quid, and
yeah,
then they can't go and record their record because they have no money because they've lost so much money getting. And it's like sometimes just having that you know reflection of what you're going to do and how it works, I think is so much more beneficial and less damaging in the long run
yeah,
to a band. And I feel that's where Venom Prison is at this moment as well, where it's kind of like, what do we do to make it, longevity and something that doesn't just burn out and fade out. And I think it's been more just kind of, we've been plotting a lot of creative stuff for this year, like not so not as much touring, but a lot more creative stuff, a lot of stuff to kind of support Erebus and like kind of ideas to go alongside Erebus, which we're already in the midst of doing, like as we speak. And I think like that could actually also be a lot more beneficial for bands to kind of have that chance to just keep creating over and over and over again, rather than, oh, I've got this album, I really need to worry about, I really need to worry being on the road for 300 days.
Yeah.
Sometimes people just want to hear creativity. They just want to hear what this band can do and what they can produce.
100%, man. Well, like,
Avenged
Sevenfold have been sitting on their new album for a year and a half or 2 years because they don't want to put it out without touring. Meanwhile, Darkest Hour have a Patreon. And I've been on video calls with members of the band and fans from around the world, and there's all sorts of bonus stuff there that they are kind of the same thing, making it a community, making it constantly, like you said, creative, but also interactive. There's options. There's loads of options, more than ever, if you take the time, which it sounds like you guys clearly are. It's great to hear.
I think the one thing I kind of feel, especially over the 2 years, the lockdown and everything, I think a lot of bands were scratching their heads thinking about, what do we need to do? How do we survive with no touring? How do we think? Yeah. It's kind of like, let's be honest, like, we'll look at a bigger scale of things like, Justin Bieber. How many tours does he do a year? He probably doesn't.
Fuck all.
He probably doesn't. He probably tours every 4 years or something, because he builds demand. He builds people to want him, and like I feel we have always been taught that, oh, we got to go, and I think that can be, a lot. It can be really damaging just having that mindset to everything all the time. And when lockdown kind of hit, I knew like a lot of friends in bands, like we'd all talk and stuff, and would be like, oh, what are we going to do? How do we manage this? Like, how are we going to get through it? And I had no idea. I was like, all I knew that is we luckily recorded Primeval just before lockdown happened.
Right.
People thought it was a lockdown project. It wasn't. It was luckily done just before lockdown.
Yeah, it would have made it a lot harder.
Yeah, and it was lucky that we had something. But when Primeval was out and we were still writing and we were very quiet, we just focused on writing. And I would just always pop on social media to do stuff on Venom Prison. And the more I realized that we were present, the more I realized people were interacting and wanted you to be there as such.
Yeah, they're idle too, like.
And I think that's kind of when it all clicked. And I was like, right, Venom Prison needs to up the social media stuff. Like, let's get a podcast on the go. Spotify playlists on the go. Let's ask people, if they want any merch reprinted, like any certain. And I think over those 2 years, I've just noticed more and more people popping up, like familiar names as such, or user tags. And I'm just kind of like started to notice that these people are just coming back and back and back, and it's more. And I just realized that it's about the touring, it's about being present. That's what it's really about, is being present. And I feel that even with no touring, as long as bands are present, being creative and releasing and just doing things like, even if you haven't got the facilities to be recording or fundings to be recording, do a cover of something. Chuck it up, do a cool cover and film it. Like, people will appreciate it. We did a Stamping Ground cover early lockdown, and we all did it from it's cool. We did Officer Down, and we literally just kind of all recorded it from our own homes, all filmed it on our phones, and then we just sent it off to our friend with a studio. He reamped all the guitars from the DIs. Joe sent me the drums from his electric drum kit.
What?
And then we just put this song together, and
That's so cool.
The cost was zero.
Yeah.
Like but that's kind of also in the in the brackets of being creative. I don't think it just needs to be fundings and facilities of
Yeah.
studios, and there's so many things that a band can do, and
Yeah, for
I think
sure.
more and more people will adapt to it.
Yeah. Well, fair play to you, and long may it continue. Listen, before we wrap up, I like to end all of these interviews with a quick lightning round. I'll give you two options. You just pick one, yeah?
Yeah.
Cool. So, first up, cats or dogs?
Cats.
Napalm Death or Carcass?
Carcass.
Pints or cans?
Cans.
Pints?
Cans.
Oh, cans. Sorry, got off there. Fair play. And most importantly of all, Star Wars prequels or Star Wars sequels, not the original trilogy.
Not the original trilogy.
No.
Oh god, prequels.
Prequels?
I got to.
Nostalgia or what?
Oh, I don't really know. It's like I've never been the biggest Star Wars person. I know a lot about Star Wars and I've watched all of it. But
Yeah.
I think it's because growing up I was around a lot of fanatics, and
Right.
I just got so burnt out by it. And then
Fair enough.
my dad was never a Star Wars fan, because he would always be like, why don't you just watch Judge Dredd instead? And I was like, oh, fair, okay.
Yeah, no, that is actually a pretty good reply.
I mean, he would always suggest ridiculous things. It would just be like, why are you watching Star Wars? You could watch Alien. I'm like, yeah. And now I've turned into that person.
Oh, the circle is complete.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, I think there's no finer moment to say, guys, Venom Prison's new album, Erebus, coming out February 4th on Century Media, but is available for pre-order right now on venomprison.com. And Ash, thanks so much for taking the time to chat to me, bro.
Thank you for having me as well. Appreciate it.
Cheers. Hey guys, thanks for watching. It's YouTube. You know the drill. Be sure to like and subscribe to get notifications about any future interviews I post here on the page, because you never know who it's going to be. I don't know who it's going to be. Could be Scott Stapp or someone good. But like and subscribe, and there'll be a new interview every second week. There's also, of course, a new episode of the Coffin Nail live on Keith FM. That's KEITHFEM.com every second Friday from 6 to 8 p.m. German time. You can also go to thecoffinnailradio.com for all things Coffin Nail related, and patreon.com/thecoffinnail to get involved with what we're doing next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.